Hey page turners, thanks for tuning in. Today I want to talk about just one comic book. This one right here, Superman number 216. And I'll explain why I think this is a special issue. Thanks for checking out the channel today. I would ask that if what I'm putting out is of interest to you, please subscribe and give me a like. I'd appreciate it. My statistics show that most of my viewers are not subscribed, so I would really appreciate it. Thank you very much. So today's comic, Superman 216. I picked this up at the Old School Comic Show in Concord, New Hampshire. I think it's April every year. They have a comic book show. Check it out. It's really cool. It's in an old ice rink down in Concord. Perfect. It's a perfect venue for this type of thing, and they have a lot of big names come. So check it out. I picked this up at the Al Stoltz Basement Comics booth. This was a $5 deal. I actually hit Al up for quite a few comics. He had a bunch for $5, and this was one of them. And when I read it, it kind of blew my mind because it actually shows Superman boots on the ground in Vietnam. DC had never had Superman participate in any ongoing conflict or war since he was created back in 1938. So this is 1969, so 31 years he had never been actively participating in any conflict that we had. Unlike Marvel, who were kicking Nazi butt all over Germany during that time, Superman never set foot in Germany. Superman did have a lot of patriotic covers during the Second World War. He was punching warships, asking us to buy war bonds, and hanging out with our boys in uniform. But this was the first time he'd ever left the U.S. and actually gone to another country. Everything that he did in the comics during the Second World War and until 1969 was all in country in America. He had some great covers, but that's as far as it went. On the inside of the comic book, he stuck to the U.S. Now, in 1939, there was a Superman comic strip put out by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Superman came close to. He broke up a lot of spy rings. He helped out soldiers that were here in America, and but it was always within the confines of mainland USA. One time in 1943, Superman took a soldier to his mountain retreat so that the soldier could get prepared physically for his Army Air Cadet test, so he could pass it. In Superman number 17, it was called his Secret Citadel, and which was built into a mountainside somewhere outside of Metropolis. But we wouldn't see the actual Fortress of Solitude until 1958, when it got introduced in Action Comics 241. The closest time that Superman ever got shown participating in some kind of military operation was in the Second World War. It was in Look magazine, the February 27th, 1940 issue of Look magazine. Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel put out a 2-page story, and it was titled "How Would Superman End World War II?" And the story was written in 1940, before the U.S. had actually entered the Second World War. It had been going on and the United States had stayed out of it for 2 years. But we kind of got forced into it when the Japanese had a sneak attack bombing of Pearl Harbor, and that was in 1941, December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day. The 2-page story was an imaginary story, aren't they all? It was an imaginary story where Superman goes all out He busts into Hitler's stronghold, grabs Hitler, and then he flies to Moscow, Russia, and grabs Joseph Stalin, and then he flies the two of them to Geneva, Switzerland, where they promptly go on trial by the League of Nations and are found guilty of unprovoked aggression against defenseless countries. To put this comic in perspective, in 1969 I was 12 years old. Up to that point, the 60s had been pretty eventful. JFK, John F. Kennedy, he was assassinated in 1963. I was in first grade at the time, and I remember them sending us home from school that day, and everyone was pretty somber. In 1964, Lyndon Johnson escalated the Southeastern Asia conflict, Vietnam, into a full-scale war, which would lead to ultimately to drafting 1.8 million service personnel into the Vietnam War between 1964 and 1973. In 1968, you had Martin Luther King was assassinated, and just a few months later, Robert Kennedy was also assassinated in June. So there was a lot going on. Richard Nixon, he was inaugurated on January 20th of 1969. Shortly after that, he started the slow process of extricating American soldiers from Vietnam. He came up with a policy. It was called the Vietnamization. The focus of that was to bring down the level of American soldiers and support and give guns and armaments to the local South Vietnamese soldiers, because we'd had so many people get killed. Sadly, those local forces, South Vietnamese forces, were unable to stop the North Vietnamese People's Army of Vietnam. And in April of 1975, the South Vietnamese government fell to communism and was unified into the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. And after all those deaths and everything that went on, if you check Vietnam out, it's a tourist destination. So kind of sad. So what prompted DC to get Superman involved in a ongoing war? At the time, as a kid, I remember seeing video after video of dead soldiers being returned to the U.S. So was this an early attempt to make DC Comics more relevant? DC said the storyline was aimed at connecting Superman to real-world issues and struggles faced by soldiers during the Vietnam War. This would, and being relevant, this would have been a year ahead of Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil's historic run on Green Lantern, Green Arrow, with number 76. That was in 1970. All right, so let's talk about this comic book. It's got a May 1969 cover date, written by Robert Kanigher, penciled by Ross Andru, inked by Joe Esposito, and at the time Mort Weisinger was the editor. And one thing, besides Superman being in Vietnam, what makes this comic special is that is a Joe Kubert cover. And this is the only Joe Kubert cover that he ever did for Superman comics. I think because of the military nature, Joe Kubert was known for doing Sergeant Rock. It was in line with the story. The artwork would be in line with the story. And another thing that makes this unique is that's the last 12-cent cover. The next issue would be 15 cents. And in the comic itself, this story opens up on a battlefield in Vietnam. Our soldiers are taking heavy shelling, and there was one soldier in particular named Johnny who just freaks out and can't stand it anymore, and just shows him running off into the jungle. Then shortly thereafter, after Johnny runs off, shortly thereafter that same unit is attacked by a giant who is, I mean, you can pick up vehicles and throw them, and he's just tearing them all apart. After the giant attacks, we see the giant, who is in uniform, He meets up with a female in the jungle, and we learn that that's Dr. Han. And from there, we cut to Clark Kent reading a multitude of letters in the Daily Planet offices from people that are asking why Superman hasn't helped the soldiers out in Vietnam. He wants to learn more about it, so he goes to Perry White and said he would like to go over to Vietnam, not as a reporter but as a medic, so that so he could meet with the soldiers and get their viewpoint on you know, what their problem is with Superman not coming. And then after Clark leaves Perry's office, Lois Lane goes in, and she says she wants to also go over to Vietnam and get the women's point of view. And she says she's a trained nurse, so who knew? So she also goes to Vietnam, but not at the same time as Clark, and Clark doesn't know that she's going to Vietnam too. You'd think Lois would tell her boyfriend, Superman, but anyway. Now, in the process of Clark getting ready to go to Vietnam, he has to pass a physical to be able to join up with the other soldiers, and he has to perform a few tricks to get past the doctor that he's examining him, and he needs to hide his Kryptonian heritage from that doctor. Even though Superman's worried about being found out that he's super, he uses his supervision to read an eye chart and read the tiny fine print on the bottom of the eye chart of the company that made the eye chart. And so then he has to come up with some reason for the doctor on why he could read it. Now that reading that eye chart, that gag was from a 1953 Bugs Bunny, Looney Tunes Bugs Bunny cartoon called Forward March Hare. See, Forward March, March Hare, get it? Forward March Hare, where Bugs also was drafted, and he does the same exact thing in his physical, only it's, you know, a little funnier. So Clark arrives in Vietnam, and you know, Superman immediately starts helping out the soldiers. Superman never really harms any Viet Cong soldiers. And then we learn that Johnny is actually the giant that attacked his own unit, and he's now returned to normal size. He now returns to normal size, and Dr. Han provides some exposition that she was able to make Johnny a giant with secret jungle herbs. And Johnny has no memory of what has gone on. He returns to his unit. He happens to run into Clark, and Clark hits him up with some X-ray vision to check him out to make sure Johnny's not harmed in any way. And he finds something out about Johnny that startles Clark. But we don't learn what he saw until later on in the story. And then Clark actually meets up with Lois, and she has been teaching the Vietnamese children while she's there, and Clark observes that she's feverish. So then we cut again to the unit getting some heavy shelling, and again Johnny freaks out, runs off. While that's happening, Lois gets sicker, near death. Johnny runs off into the jungle, meets up with Dr. Han. She gives him a kiss, and that triggers his change into a giant. I don't know if she had something on her lips or what. And then she gives him the orders to destroy the Americans. When he's a giant, Johnny's kind of like a puppy for Dr. Han, and she can give him any kind of direction, and he'll do it just to get her approval. In the meantime, Superman has been asked to meet with General Morley, who tells him that Superman needs to destroy King Kong, which is Johnny as the giant. That's what the locals have been calling him, King Kong. Only Kong is spelled with a C, because the Viet Cong which relates to it was the generic term for the communist-led armed movement in South Vietnam. So the general admits that he knows that King Kong is actually his son because they did they took some photos of the giant, and on his hand is the West Point ring that General Morley gave his son, and he's wearing it, and it still fits. So even though he says, I know the giant is my son Johnny, but he says, my order stands, Superman. You got to destroy King Kong. So in the thick of the fighting, General Morley is there, and Johnny hears his father call out to him, and recognizing his father's voice, it causes him to start to change back to normal size again. Now Superman jumps in and he does his thing, and he beats back the Viet Cong artillery, and he bowls through a group of soldiers, knocking them all over the place. And so Johnny is returning to normal size. He gets his senses back, but then he sees his dad's in harm's way with these soldiers and everything that's going on. So he runs in under a hail of fire, wanting to save his father. And the father yells out, Superman, please, help my son. And Superman says, nope. And Johnny happens to come through the skirmish fine, untouched, and happy and healthy. And then at that point, Superman reveals that when he used his X-ray vision on the sly as Clark, he leaves out some details, so they don't know that it was his X-ray vision, but he left out some details so that they don't get the timing of Clark and him being Superman and checking Johnny out. He realized that Johnny's eyes were he said Johnny's eyes were dilated, so he realized he was under the influence of a super drug, and that even though the effects of the drug have worn off, Johnny has become permanently invulnerable. That's why Superman stayed out of the battle and let Johnny face his fear. And in the meantime, Dr. Han is captured, and we find Lois recovering in the hospital. So it's pretty much a happy ending. If you have read this comic, please let me know what you thought about it. And especially if you were a kid of the 60s, like I was, there were a lot of nice things that happened in the 60s, but there were a lot of horrible things that happened too. I'm glad that I read this now as an adult. I don't think it would have had the impact on me that it would have if I'd have read it as a kid, and I wouldn't have had the understanding of how some things worked when I was a kid. I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please subscribe. I appreciate it, and I'll see you again soon. And I'm going to leave you with a clip of that Bugs Bunny cartoon. So I'll see you again soon. Take care, and thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
And I want you to read as much of this chart as you can.
ATWRKLNOCWODRKGSOLTYKLONDCRPLD Acme Eye Test Chart, printed by the United States Printing Office, Washington, D.C., Reg U.S. Pat Off.
Yeah.